starting up the live stream, so give us just a moment.
So click that.
Okay, great. So I'm so glad to see all of you here. It is our first Shabbat of the new year, and we decided that this Shabbat would be Shabbat for beginners, which some might think of as like, oh, for people who are entry level, just starting to learn about Judaism. But the reality is, we all have just begun a new year. We are all beginners in our own way. There are things that we may have questions about. And so, the way that this is going to work, this Shabbat service is going to work, is that at any point throughout the service, if you have a question about something happening in the service, then you can send a message in the chat, which you could send either to the group or you could send directly to Student Rabbi Ari, and they will either share a bit of information that they have, or they may hold on to it and bring it to, we're going to have a little bit of an Ask the Rabbi section of the service. So we will get started this evening with the words, Hine Matov, how wonderful it is that we can be together. And please make sure that everyone is muted. Oh, there we go. Hine Matov u'manayim, Shevet achim gam yachad. 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 Shevet achim gam yachad. We will welcome Shabbat with the lighting of Shabbat candles, and it's my pleasure to invite Marla Zero to share with us this reading and then to light Shabbat candles.
Okay. I begin with a prayer of gratitude for all that is holy in my life. God needs no words, no English or Hebrew, or semantics and no services, but I need them. Through prayer, I can sense my inner strength. Is everyone else hearing this echo of me? Oh, well, so be it. But I need them. Through prayer, I can sense my inner strength, my inner purpose, my inner joy, my capacity to love. As I reach upward in prayer, I sense these qualities in my Creator. To love God is to love each other, to work, to make our lives better. To love God is to love the world God created, and to work to perfect it. To love God is to love dreams of peace and joy that illuminate all of us, and to bring that vision to life. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher k'nishana b'mitzvosav v'tzivana v'halugna shel Shabbat.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. So one of the questions that was asked, if we could actually go back to the Shabbat candle blessings, thanks Mara. One of the questions that's been asked to me before that I figured this is a great moment to talk about, why do we have one person read the blessing and then have all of us sing together for the candles? So it turns out that lighting of Shabbat candles is actually originally a personal blessing that is done in one's home. So in a number of communities, you actually don't even have the lighting of the Shabbat candles because the assumption is that people did it at home before they came to services. But in the classical reform world, the way that they kind of took this prayer direction is that there are times when people say things to themselves, and there are times when we say things together in a declaratory way as a community. So, for example, lighting of the Shabbat candles, you may have someone who will say the blessing to themselves, which is something that we do. But then afterwards, then as a community, we kind of reaffirm the blessing by saying it again all together as a community. So even if someone hasn't individually lit the Shabbat candles in their own home, they vicariously lit through sharing that blessing and through having encountered the Shabbat candle blessing at temple. So now we will continue with Lechu Neranana on slide 6. Lechu Neranana, yadadai, dai, 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 Adonai, yadadai, dai, 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 Nariya, yadadai, dai, 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 Letzor Yishenu, welcome Shabbat as the Sabbath bride with the words of Lecha Dodi. Lecha Dodi likrat kala yalalai 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 p'nei Shabbat mekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala yalalai 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 p'nei Shabbat mekabela. Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad yishmi'anu el hameyuchad Adonai echad u'shmo echad l'shem u'tiferet ve'litzila. Lecha Dodi likrat kala yalalai 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 p'nei Shabbat mekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala yalalai 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 p'nei Shabbat mekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nilcha ki hi mekor ha'bracha mirosh mikedem nesucha sof ma'aseh b'machshavat tchila. Lecha Dodi likrat kala yalalai 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 p'nei Shabbat mekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala yalalai 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 p'nei Shabbat mekabela. Boi v'shalom ateret bala gam b'simcha uv'tzohala toch emunei am segula boi chala boi chala. Lecha Dodi likrat kala yalalai 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 p'nei Shabbat mekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala yalalai 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 p'nei Shabbat mekabela. At this time, we move from the section of our service called Kabbalat Shabbat, meaning to receive Shabbat, which we did through lighting Shabbat candles, through singing Shabbat psalms to get us in the spirit, through singing Lecha Dodi as though we are welcoming a Shabbat bride. And we move to the section of the service called Shema Uvirchotecha. So Shema, we've heard this one before. Shema, we'll sing it together a little bit later, but actually it's the Uvirchotecha part and her blessings. So the Shema has its own extra section of, okay, we're building ourselves up to one of the most important statements in the Jewish religion, and the religion part of Judaism. So we have our warm-up to the warm-up, and now we are going to warm up with the Baruch as we prepare ourselves to say what was traditionally said in classical Reform Judaism, the watchword of our faith. This is the most, if you don't remember anything else about Judaism, you'll remember the Shema, and we have to get ourselves in the mood for that. So we will start with the Baruch Hu, the first blessing of Shema Uvirchotecha. Please rise in all the ways you are able. Yai, 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 Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. Yai dai dai, yai dai dai dai, yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai dai, yai dai dai dai, yai dai 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 dai. Please return to your seats. We have gotten in the habit of singing a poetic interpretation of Ma'ariv Aravim because I think it's beautiful, but it turns out that the words of Ma'ariv Aravim are some, I would declare, among the most poetic words of our Siddur. I'm sure that there are plenty who have different answers of what prayer they think is the most poetic. However, we are going to switch things up tonight, and we're going to read the poetry that our ancestors wrote a much longer time ago than the version we usually sing tonight. Student Rabbi Ari, who is going to be sharing with us this reading?
Jack Samoski has agreed to step forth and read this slide for us and to read this piece so that we can take it in together.
Perfect, thank you. Jack, when you're ready.
Jack, I believe you may still be muted.
I'm sorry, but I'm having a heck of a time
You're doing great.
getting back to the visual here. Try me again. Can you hear me, Ari?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay. I'm looking at my screen and it says Ma'ariv Aravim.
That's
Yep.
what we need you to read.
That's what you're doing.
Okay. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, who speaks the evening into being, skillfully opens the gates, thoughtfully alters the time and changes the seasons and arranges the stars and their heavenly courses according to plan. You are creator of day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light, transforming day into night and distinguishing one from the other. Adonai Tzavaot is your name. Ever-living God, may you reign continually over us into eternity. Blessed are you, Adonai, who brings on evening.
Amen. Thank you so much, Jack. So we now come to this watchword of our faith, this most important statement that says, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, Adonai is our God and Adonai is one. I like to call the Shema an ahava sandwich because in the structure of our liturgy, it actually is not, when we're talking about the prayers that come before and come after, the prayer that comes right before Shema, which we are not doing today, but we have done in the past, is ahavat olam, so God's love for us. And on the other side of Shema, we have ve'ahavta, which is you shall love Adonai your God. So God loves us, we should love God, and right in the middle of all of that love is the Shema. And the Shema is actually not a statement to God, but rather to Yisrael, to the people of Israel, who are commanded to know that Adonai is our God and that Adonai is one. So as we think about what it means to have all of the things that have divinity in it, all of the creations that God created that have little bits and sparks of divinity, all of the human beings that are created in God's image, they all come together to create this unity. God is one, surrounded by love, and that means so are we. So please join us with the words of Shema. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. 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 Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. We continue with the words of Mi Chamocha. We are, in this week's Torah portion, getting closer. We're getting closer to the moment when all of Israel got to leave Egypt. They got to exit. There's an exodus. They get to exit. There we go. And on the other side of the Red Sea, or the Sea of Reeds, they sing these words in gratitude. Student Rabbi Ari, who's going to be sharing with us this reading?
Pip volunteered to step forward and read this for us. So Pip, whenever you're ready.
Give us a place to rest, Adonai, our God. Bring us into shelter in the soft, long evening shadows of your truth. For with you are true protection and safety, and in your presence are acceptance and gentle love. Watch over us as we go forth. Prepare us as we return. Spread over us your shelter of peace, over all we love, over our Jerusalem and yours.
Amen. Thank you so much. And I'm not sure that we've sung this version of Hashkivenu before. These are the last words of Hashkivenu. The words are Baruch Atah Adonai, Haporei Sukat Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim. Baruch Atah Adonai Haporei Sukat Shalom Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael. Baruch Atah Adonai Haporei Sukat Shalom Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael. Ve'al Yerushalayim ve'al kol amo. Ve'al Yerushalayim Shalom. Ve'al Yerushalayim ve'al kol amo. Ve'al Yerushalayim Shalom. Baruch Atah Adonai Haporei Sukat Shalom Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael. Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael. Okay, so we now come to the Ask the Rabbi part. Some of you have been already sending questions to Student Rabbi Ari, I've noticed in the chat. It seems like it's been a very active chat this Shabbat. How wonderful. So Student Rabbi Ari, what are some questions that were asked that we're going to bring this evening?
So I've gotten a couple really fun questions from folks, starting with the origins of some of the choreography that comes up in Aleinu. But the question I really wanted to bring forward, because someone asked it and it has an entire story behind it, so I figured it would be useful to share with the group, is why do we whisper the verse, Baruch Shem Kvod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed, blessed be the glory of God's majesty forever and ever? Why do we whisper that after the Shema? Why is it said in an undertone? Now, I know a couple different reasons for this, and I wanted to give you a chance to see if you wanted to say any of them first before I throw anything else out there. And shout out to Marla and Susan for bringing us that question.
Great question. Thank you. So I also have heard a couple different stories, and sometimes, I think I've shared a little bit with you about the history of Midrash that we have. Midrash that kind of tells a story that explains a gap in what our understanding is, and then there's some Midrash that's more like a law of like, we do this and this is how we do it and this is the very exact way that we do it. And for some of us, some of those midrash works a little bit better than the other. And the explanations that I've heard have kind of gone in these two ways. One is because that's the way that we were commanded to do that. That's how we should do that. And along those similar lines, there are some who say the reason that we whisper Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed, but we don't whisper Shema, is because Shema is in the Torah multiple times, actually, and it is a declaration, right? But Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed actually isn't paired with the Shema in the Torah. It's something that our ancestors who wrote the liturgy that we now consider to be traditional, they paired these two together. And so that was one of the explanations is, well, that Baruch Shem part wasn't in the Torah in the same way, so they wanted to distinguish between those two parts. One of the other explanations that I've heard actually has to do a little bit more with the function of what is public prayer and what is personal prayer. So we have this declaration that we're saying to all of people of Israel, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. And then as we hear ourselves saying it to somebody else, or we hear someone else saying it to us, then upon receiving that information of being reminded, it's kind of a blessing to God. Thank you for that reminder. Thank you for reminding us that God is one, that we are all one. So those are two of the answers. One's a little bit more technical, one's a little bit more story-ish, a little bit more ethereal. But there are many more answers than the two that I just gave. Student Rabbi Ari, did you have one that another one in addition to the two that I gave?
Yeah, I have a couple different ones actually. I'm trying to figure out like which one I want to share. The one that comes up the most commonly when you try and look up the answer for this, in terms of like how are these two verses specifically tied together if they have nothing to do with each other in terms of one is in the Torah and the other is not. And the tie seems to be associated most directly with Yaakov Avinu, with the patriarch Jacob, where basically there's this idea that when Jacob gathered all of his children to him to give them blessings before he passed away, he also told them that he would give them information about the end of days and when the Mashiach would come, when would the Messiah come. And one of the concerns that he expressed when he gathered them was that he worried that when he died and wasn't there to hold the family together, that they would all go astray and start worshiping other gods and worshiping idols. And all of these, 12 sons together declared very loudly, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, in order to be like, no, we are very devoted to the one God that you have raised us in. We would never stray from that. And then and then Jacob says kind of in an undertone, like in a sigh of relief, like Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed, like I am, like indeed God will be blessed forever if y'all stay true to this path, and then passed away. And the thing is that the sages, when they were putting this together and encountered this midrash, they felt like they couldn't eliminate that postscript just because it wasn't in the Torah, because it was attributed to Jacob. But they wanted to acknowledge the disparity there, and therefore they said one in an undertone and the other declared out loud. And then the other more spiritual explanation is that being able to bless God that explicitly is seen as a bit high and mighty for us mere mortals. So we say it in an undertone in order to not get too big for our britches.
I love that story. I love the story of Jacob and Jacob's sons. Especially because we know they weren't always united. They were not always on the same page. But as anybody who has encountered strife in family and then seen a reuniting, there is that beautiful sense of relief, of an exhale that worries that we held on to when there was strife may not come to fruition. Our worst fears may not be. Thank you for that. And I think that we could do one more question if there was one more that was asked.
Everything else that got asked, I was able to get answered kind of directly, but I want to open the floor just real quick in case anyone's feeling very brave and wants to, spit out a question while we have a couple minutes with everyone's eyes on answering questions.
One question. So feel brave and remember that it's one question.
Yeah, just one question. I promise we don't bite. Everyone learns together.
So I put in a question in the chat.
Oh yeah, you asked me the first question. That is correct. Which was about the Aleinu and the choreography. Which
No.
Oh,
sorry, student Rabbi Ari.
There's a new one. Yeah, I didn't see that. What is the history behind pairing specific verses from other books in the Tanakh in Haftara with the Torah portions? That is an excellent question. Do we know where the pairings come from?
So essentially, this is a tradition that we don't exactly know when it started. Why? But we do know the why a little bit. And if you notice the themes that will come up in the pairing, a lot of times the Haftara is a commentary on how the rabbis want you to read the Torah portion. So you might start reading the Torah portion one way or be focusing on certain themes in the Torah portion, and then find out as you're reading the Haftara that, the rabbis were actually really concerned about this other part and they wanted to highlight that, and so that's why they ended up pairing the Haftara with this particular Torah portion. So it was kind of a way that our ancestors, our sages, were able to have their drashot, their divrei Torah, live on in history, because throughout the years, still to this day, the Haftara that we read as we read this Torah portion, even if we don't have their exact commentary on why we're doing it this way, we still pair these Torah portions together. And so this is something that certainly, in terms of the history of liturgy, this was something that certainly was I would say, I'm trying to remember when the practice of regularly reading Torah in the same way happens, but it certainly, I would say, before like the 12-ish hundreds, the 1100s. And we know that in the Talmud, when the rabbis are asking these questions of one another, of how they're supposed to live a Jewish life, they'll actually say some words about why certain things are paired with one another. So it's not exactly the answer to your question, but that's the information that I have at the moment for you, Sean.
The other thing I would throw in there is that occasionally the texts in the Tanakh actually reference events that happen in the Torah directly, especially because when we're looking at haftaras that relate to prophecy, then people are going to be citing a specific interaction there and are going to be saying, do you remember when this happened? Now I am talking about this. And in cases where there is an explicit reference, those almost always get paired together as a Torah Haftara pairing. Because in that case, the prophet in question is specifically looking to continue that particular thread of conversation.
Amazing, thank you.
And then the other question that we got thrown is honestly an excellent question, which is, how many forbidden on Shabbat labors am I performing by removing the kitten from my keyboard during a virtual service? Oh my goodness. And we have the offending culprit is on camera right now. What a tiny baby.
Oh my gosh, what a cute kitty. What I would say is you're actually not because you are in the confines of your house. So in the confines of your house, in the same way that a mom is able to carry her baby, then you are effectively carrying your baby by carrying your cat. But what I think the halacha would be is that you may have to make sure it's done within your eruv. So within the boundaries of what would be considered your home. So in certain communities, they'll actually have an eruv or a boundary that is like around a certain community so that, moms can push their kids in their strollers and can pick them up to change their diapers and all of these different things. So in the spirit of care and not because you're doing so to cause work, I actually think that I would argue that you are not breaking Shabbat law. So thank you for that question.
Although I now have the question, if your cat is your baby, in the same way that human parents are responsible for the sins committed by their human children until they are of age, do you then incur the responsibility for any Shabbat violations committed by your kittens? As in pressing keyboards, that's activating electricity. Do you now get, naughty points for that? If your cat breaks something on Shabbat, is that on you? And at what point in a cat's developmental growth are they no longer considered a child? These are the pressing questions that today's rabbinate needs to answer.
And that is the cliffhanger that we are going to leave you with at the end of this question session. If you want to know the answer to this question and more questions, you'll have to come back next time that we have this opportunity to ask questions. So thank you everyone for sending in your questions, and as we continue with the service, as you have more questions, please feel free to send them to Student Rabbi Ari. We are going to continue with our tefillah, our core part of our service. So please rise in all of the ways you are able. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi agi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah. Ha'el hagadol hagibor v'hanora, El Elyon gomer chasadim tovim, v'konei hakol, v'zocher chasdei avot v'imahot, u'mevii gula livnei v'neihem, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע, משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר, מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש. Please take a moment for your own silent prayer. It's now my pleasure to invite student Rabbi Ari to share some words of wisdom for us this Shabbat.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So it sounds weird in hindsight to say that I slept in on the morning of January 6th last year. I am a notoriously deep sleeper, though, and the increasingly frantic buzzing of notifications on my phone had no chance of penetrating my rest. By the time I innocently sauntered onto Facebook at the crack of 1:40 in the afternoon, the overwhelming majority of my friends and loved ones were in the midst of an active crisis. It was the first Wednesday of 2021, and democracy itself was already in immediate danger. Take a moment with me to gently revisit your memories of that day last year. What were you doing when you understood that our country was experiencing an insurrection attempt in real time? Who were you with? Did you watch the news footage as it came on, or catch up through social media? Perhaps you chose to avoid the topic as much as possible, disconnecting from the constant stream of updates to preserve your peace of mind. Given that there's no instruction manual on how to live through a historical event, there's no one response that's objectively right. When our world falls apart, our perspective narrows down to the most immediate needs and priorities, doing the next right thing, one step at a time, until the crisis subsides. So what does any of this have to do with this week's Parsha? While the commentators all go into excruciating detail over each catastrophe brought down upon Egypt, as well as the grandiose political standoff between Moses and Pharaoh, it was surprisingly challenging to dig up any material that talked about the Egyptians themselves. The commentators' silence on the subject makes room for us to create our own midrash. While the Egyptians were witnessing a nationwide slave revolt, an imploding government, and an increasingly horrifying series of minor apocalypses, they were what? Fleeing the country? Fighting for their lives? Had they done nothing noteworthy at all? It struck me that the average everyday people whose leadership caused their lives to be so utterly destroyed are so absent from our readings of this text. One of those few clear references to the Egyptians themselves comes up in Shemot Rabbah 14:3, surrounding the plague of darkness, asking, why did the Holy One bring darkness upon the Egyptians? Because there were transgressors in Israel who had patrons among the Egyptians, lived in their midst in affluence and honor, and were therefore unwilling to leave Egypt. Of all the possible responses that Chazal, our sages of blessed memory, could have chosen to highlight, why this one? The key to unlocking this riddle lies in the description we receive of the plague itself. God brought down upon Egypt not merely an absence of light, but a darkness so heavy and stagnant, it literally trapped people in place for days on end. By this point, we're on plague 9 of 10. Egypt is being physically torn apart by environmental and political chaos in response to systemic social injustice. And yet there are Egyptians and Israelites alike who are still insisting on business as usual. The real evil being exposed by this darkness, the plague behind the plague, as it were, is inertia. When we insist on going back to normal the minute a crisis is no longer imminent, the harm turns into a cycle that is sure to come around again. As I said earlier, there's no guide on how to survive an apocalypse, in no small part because each one is different. From a historical standpoint, the world falls apart pretty regularly, but it rarely does so in the same way twice. It makes sense that when we are acutely in crisis, our perspective shrinks down to getting through the day and not much else. It's probably best to wait on writing the bylaws for your survival commune until after you've found clean water. But what do you do when it's not one crisis like that, but another and another, or even multiple at once? The trouble with much of our societal understanding of trauma is the assumption that it ends. We understand pain, horror, and loss as specific points in time, events existing relative to an imagined normal that we desperately cling to as being the model for what our lives should be like. The reality for many people, though, is an ongoing one. You have to develop your capacity to go on while still actively exposed to the forces that cause your trauma. Racism, sexism, transphobia, ableism. Having to navigate those systems is not a one-off experience. And for that reason, combating institutional oppression and violence has to be an ongoing practice as well. For many of us, the riots we witnessed a year ago yesterday proved that. We cannot put down our tools just because the last big event has passed. The administration that inspired that riot may be gone, but the ideologies and power imbalances that made it possible in the first place are still a clear and present danger. No individual person is built to fight for all things at all times. If we cannot care for and sustain ourselves and our loved ones, nothing else we do will last. At the same time, the ability to disengage completely from any narrative is a privilege. Only those who are unimpacted by a story have the freedom to remain apolitical or silent as the world collapses around them. And that neutrality, too, is a misnomer. In the words of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who passed away just a week and a half ago, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. As disparate human beings, we owe it to ourselves to survive in this world however we must, because that is only one part of that picture. As members of humanity, we owe it to each other to work in community even in times of crisis, to care beyond ourselves, act on issues that don't affect us, and refuse to let the darkness tire us into stillness and apathy. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you so much. As we think about plague after plague after plague, we also think about those who are in need of the current plague at hand. If you are thinking of someone who is in need of healing, healing of body, healing of spirit, healing of soul, please feel free to type their names in the chat, to say their names aloud to yourself or to someone else in the room, or to hold them in your heart. And we hold in our hearts additionally all those who have recently been infected with this new Omicron variant of COVID-19. We continue with the words of Misha Beirach. Misha Beirach Avotenu Mekor HaBracha Ve'imotenu. May the source of strength who bless the ones before continue with the Aleinu, please rise in all the ways you are able. Aleinu leshabeach la'adon hakol, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא, ביום ההוא, יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו, ושמו, ושמו אחד. We take this moment to remember those who were a blessing in our lives. This Shabbat, we are remembering the yahrzeits of the following people. Please rise as your loved one's name is read. Alex Avon, father-in-law of Ruth Avon. Maurice Carmona, remembered by Tony Monroe. Heather Citron, daughter of Rosalind Citron. Rose DeJack, remembered by Verona Gore. James Dimino, husband of Phyllis Dimino. Selma Field, mother of Penny Feinberg. Mildred Karin, remembered by Sarah Schneider. Shirley Reva Reisner, remembered by Robin Hunter. Ron Rosenberg, father of Randall Rosenberg. We now invite all who are observing their first year of mourning to rise at this time. And we now rise as a community with our mourners as we say the words of the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitzgadal v'yitzkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divrach hirute v'yamlich malchute, b'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chayid d'chol beit Yisrael, v'agala uvizman kariv v'imru, Amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam u'lalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei d'kudsha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru, Amen. Yehi shlama Rabbah min Shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru, Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru, Amen. Zichronam livracha, may their memories be for a blessing. To which we say, Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru, Amen. Ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. It's my pleasure to invite our trustee president and AV guy, Rick Brodzinski to share announcements with us.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and welcome to my little corner of the sanctuary. They're rather long this week, so stay with me. First off, not on the paper, you will have noticed, I believe, some changes in our sound system already. We have the rabbi's guitar is now mic'd properly. We have our soundboards installed. The new amplifier is installed. And we'll slowly be getting everything else finished up. So
Let's give some spirit hands to Rick for having set all that up.
Torah study will resume this Sunday at 9 a.m. Check the weekly email for the Zoom link. Join us next Friday night for a special online-only Shabbat service honoring the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. In next week's email, there will be a link to help those of you who wish to donate for the Jewish victims of the devastating fires north of Denver this past week. Growing up in religious school, if we learned anything about American Jewish history, it was usually about those who came from Eastern Europe, usually focusing on stories of those who came from shtetls, the tenements. There is so much more to Jewish history. Join us virtually on Thursday, February 3rd at 5 p.m. as we learn from Canted David Fair about the history of American Black Jewish music and lived experiences. As we observe Black History Month, we will also reflect on how American Jews can better foster spiritual communities where Jews of color feel like they can truly belong. This event is open to all ages 12 and up. Registration will open this upcoming week. Please register by Wednesday, February 2nd to receive the Zoom link. A $10 donation is suggested. This program is part of the What You Didn't Learn in Religious School series. In celebration of Temple Beth Torah's 60th anniversary, Women of Temple Beth Torah invite one and all to join us for a virtual tour of Israel. A licensed Israeli tour guide, Sherry Robbins, will help us explore Israel's miracles and complexities in a unique way, virtually, with no jet lag. We welcome you to 3 consecutive Sundays of discovery on February 27th, March 6th, and March 13th at 1:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Registration is now open, and since this is a virtual event, everyone is welcome to attend no matter where they are in the world. Please see our virtual tour of Israel event page for details, pricing, registration, and payment. For any questions, please email women@tbt@gmail.com. And join us as Temple Beth Torah participates in the Fremont Green Challenge. We are calling our initiative 60 by 60. We see on a regular basis how much the earth needs our care. Our need to action for present and future generations is clear. In the coming months, we will be challenging ourselves as households and as a community to reduce our carbon footprint and to live greener lives. Each action you choose to take on will bring us closer to 60 greening actions in our community before our 60th anniversary in June. We need your help accomplishing this audacious goal. Check out www.fremontgreenchallenge.org, that will be in an email, and also keep an eye out in the Temple Weekly email for more information about how to be involved. If you would like to learn more or if you would like to get more involved, please contact Susan Schwartz, our Social Action Committee co-chair. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you. A lot of exciting stuff is happening, so I'm glad that we got to hear about it. What a great way to start off the new year. We will move on to blessing. So if you are in the same room as somebody who you consider to be your family, please reach out to them. If you are not, I encourage you to close your eyes and picture your family, and those who you are going to be sending this blessing to. And we say, may God bless you and keep you. May God shine God's face upon you and be gracious to you. May God's face turn to you and grant you peace. To which we all say, Amen. We now continue with Kiddush. So if you are at home and you have some sweet beverage that you would like to bless, please quickly go grab it, and we will get started with that blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho be'ahava uvratzon hinchilanu, zikaron lema'aseh v'reishit, ki hu yom techila lemikra kodesh, zeicher mikol hamim, v'shabbat kodshecha be'ahava uvratzon hinchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat. L'chaim. I'm holding up my imaginary wine, but I will take a quick drink when I return to my home. And we now come to the motzi. So if you have a bready, delicious treat that you would like to bless, I encourage you to go grab it. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. B'te'avon. And we close this evening with a oldie but goodie. Bim bam, bim 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 bam, bim 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 bam, bim bam, bim 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 bam, bim 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 bam. Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat 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 shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat 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 shalom, Shabbat 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 shalom, Shabbat 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 shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat 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 shalom. Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat.
Shalom.
And I